Alex, welcome to Nova Scribes. Over to you.
Cool, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I was very excited to learn about Nova Scribes and hopefully be a regular part of this community. It's really cool, and I want to learn more about what all of you do. So as Brian mentioned, I'm Alex Suchman, one of the co-founders of Barometer. I live in DC, like many people in DC. I had a background in public policy for many years and worked in academia for a little while in the space between federal and state policy on health policy for a long time. Worked for a small contractor that did research and program evaluation, all on health and social services. And what I realized was you had all these very smart people, very ambitious people that had big goals, like big outcomes that they wanted to achieve that would impact a lot of people. But the day-to-day of the workplace was just a hot mess in terms of process, in terms of role clarity, in terms of good communication channels so people could coordinate and know what was going on. And I actually, at first, just unintentionally and very intentionally shifted my career into operations and organization development because I could see the train that was coming down the tracks of all the problems that were going to happen and just started solving them. And then 5 years ago, went out on my own as a consultant to do that type of work, but was fascinated by you can't even really get to the process and the organizing stuff if you can't get the people to talk to each other. And the biggest challenges that people were talking about, the things that they were complaining about, the things that were causing them to wake up in the middle of the night and start to hate their jobs were the interpersonal things. And so much of that was, they're like middle school dynamics, somebody came late to my meeting and that was disrespectful, or this person always turns things in at the last minute and that sets off my schedule, and all these things. Like, just communicate about it, just be more transparent. Or managers saying, I'm not getting what I want from my team in terms of the deliverables. And I said, well, how did you give them the instructions? Well, they should just know how to do it. I was like, okay. I see a lot of shaking heads or nodding heads. That's where the idea for these games came in, is recognizing that in most of our conversations and interactions with people, we're kind of on autopilot. It's like our reflex taking over. And we aren't necessarily aware of how every little thing that we say and do and how we say or do it is going to have an impact on other people. And we're not, if we understand that and can be more intentional about what we say and how we show up, we can probably have better outcomes for other people, which is going to lead to a better experience for ourselves. And so that's where the idea for Barometer and games comes up, is just games are a really great way to create an experience, a shared experience that people can then reflect on and apply those reflections to their real interactions in the workplace. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're actually going to play a bunch of our games. I want this to be very informal and conversational. So just pop in with a question if you want to take yourself off mute or raise your hand or put it in the chat. I want to make sure this is interesting and engaging for you. But first, I just love to hear from some of you what interests you about this topic. If there's anything specific you're looking to see or learn this evening.
Something that just came up for me was, how might I use this with clients?
Mm-hmm.
That was just one thing that came up off the bat. And it's just, I'm curious about it.
Yeah.
I love how play unlocks minds, right? Takes us out of that, got to be a grown-up, got to be a professional, which to me is like a locking down kind of a energy, or an away state. So play brings me in a toward state and opens up all sorts of possibilities.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I think we have this idea of like what work culture and like work behavior is like, that's very robotic, but that's not what people are really like. And we feel very miserable when we're pigeonholed into that. And so I think play opens up, what's somebody really like? What are they, how do they act and how do they feel? What's their body language when they're relaxed in their element? And why can't work be more like that? You're spending all this time with people, you're working on things that hopefully you feel somewhat engaged in. Why not make it a more personal and in some ways casual experience? So cool. Thank you, Matteo. Any other things that you're hoping to see or learn this evening?
I would just second the most of the coaching that I do and working with teams, and I work with IT a lot, I say it's never about the technology. You never call and complain about, oh, I'm struggling with the complexity of the technology. It's always people and process and the interrelationships. So I'm very much interested in how to maybe bring different tools to solve those problems, because those are the ones I'm always trying to help to solve.
Excellent, thank you. I think I'm pretty confident in saying that all of those interests will be addressed. I'll give you a little bit of a preview of our sort of what our business is, but then we'll just get right into it. We're essentially building in the long run a platform of games and a community of people who want to use games in their work. Everyone from just a manager that wants to do something a little bit different in a team meeting and do something fun on a regular basis, to facilitators or people that do professional development or organizational development and who want to add experiential learning components. So we want to make games accessible and teach people how to facilitate games. Right now we have a game catalog that everything in there right now is free. We will be creating a sort of subscription model, and there'll be different levels for people who are not professional facilitators and just want fun activities or team building, or professionals who want to use these for deeper purposes. But the reason we're doing it that way rather than service-based with us doing all the facilitations is because right now the facilitated engagements we could do, the way we can apply these games, are limited to my knowledge and my experience and the other people in our team. And what I think games are so great at is they can be adapted. You can apply any language to it. You can, attach it to sort of make any context. You can play with the rules, and they're so malleable, which I think just makes them ideal to use to highlight all different types of learning outcomes. So, really, we just want to put these out there and get them into the arms of smart, creative people who can then do great things with them. All right, I'm going to start sharing my screen. So I won't get to see you in as much detail, but please just take yourself off of mute if you want to ask a question or add something. So our big thing is using games to increase self-awareness, both at the individual level, but also at the interpersonal and collective level, and creating a situation where you can reflect on how do you show up in this particular situation, given this particular game or this group of people, or what time of day it is. How do you show up, and what do you notice about how you show up, and what's affecting that? What are some trends that you can notice? What are your strengths? Where do you thrive? Where do you feel uncomfortable? And how can you infer some patterns from that? What are opportunities for you to grow, to try something different, to get out of that lizard brain comfort zone of, if somebody challenges an idea, I automatically get really defensive. Well, that's not really going to help anybody. And that's probably not how you really want to show up. So, how can you use somebody challenging you in a game to try to do something different and grow? Where can you make space to encourage and accommodate others who might be approaching the game in a different way than you? And then how can you just expand the collective awareness of how your whole team as a team is going through this experience, and what it says about your strengths, about some vulnerabilities, and about the type of culture and work environment that you want to have. We're going to jump right into our first exercise, which is called climate reading. But first, we use the Zoom annotate feature. I'm guessing most of you are familiar with the Zoom annotate. Is there anybody who's not? Okay, so if you want to just open up the annotate feature, and get ready to draw on the screen. This is called climate reading, and it's a very quick way to read the climate, to take the pulse on a team. You can just do it on literally where are people in the moment. You can look at how do people identify with certain personality traits or work styles. You can use it to say, how strongly do people feel about one particular option or another? But just having something visual it's much more efficient than going around the room and everybody giving an opinion. And it also lets you see, where you are relative to other people. So if you want to just take a moment and mark on the screen, where on each one of these four continuum do you fall? Are you feeling more energized or more fatigued right now? Do you tend to be more of a learn by watching or learn by doing person? Are you more in the detail-oriented space or big picture thinker? And do you prefer collaborative or competitive games? I love the little pictures. Very cool. You guys are all over the board. So I'm going to put this out there to you, because you all work with teams. In just looking at this and seeing the range of responses, how do you think this, like what type of questions might you want to ask to dig into what you can learn from this and how you can apply this? How might knowing this type of information be useful?
Yeah, I think in a team context, what's coming up for me is that this is a good opportunity to reflect and say, oh, okay, so we've got a good portion of our folks who are fatigued right now. What's coming up for you? What's behind that? Or maybe if I know that, I'm just going to make this up, but if I know that the pink X is Rachel, I'd be like, wow, Rachel, I always saw you more as a detail person. You put yourself as a big picture person. Tell me what's behind that. So I guess as an opportunity to get curious about folks.
Yeah, that's great. What else is coming up for people? How this might be interesting or useful?
I like how it's a way that people can interact non-verbally, and also a little bit of tactileness and just also being expressive with picking like the color or the icon or a little drawing or something.
Yeah. Absolutely. One thing that I found so interesting, at this point, I've done this activity with over 100 teams. And it kind of like let some of the air out of, like in a good way, like let some of the tension out. And people, even if you've worked with somebody for 10 years, maybe you've never articulated, oh, I'm a detail person and they're a big picture person. But once you see it like this, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is why it always feels like we're talking past each other when we have to submit our monthly reports. Or this is why you need to take a lot of time at the beginning of the project to understand the context when I just want to get started on the tasks and go. And we get really frustrated with each other. It's just really powerful to know those things and to start to explore how these things show up. Another thing that comes up a lot, especially with these middle two, is people will often say, well, it depends. Sometimes I'm more on this side and sometimes I'm more on this side. And I would want to dig in. So is there anybody who had that, like, well, it depends, sometimes I'm one or the other? Mateo, I'm curious, like, what does it depend on? In what type of situation would you be more inclined to one approach or one way of thinking than the other?
Well, it's yeah, I guess it's contextual responses. So like, I am feeling energized, but it's also the end of the day, right? So I'm a bit fatigued and like, it's a dynamic tension that I'm holding. How do I represent that graphically here to answer your question, right? And then, yeah, the learning, the other questions I'm thinking about in specific contexts or scenarios. So it's kind of like answering questions for an MBTI assessment or something like that, right? So trying to hold the same mindset for the specific context or purpose. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. Is there anybody else that sort of felt like it depends or in the middle?
I had a both. I like both collaborative games and competitive games.
Mm-hmm. Is it because you just generally like all games, or does it depend on who you're playing with or what mood you're in?
Yes, I tend to like many games, I also sometimes it's on mood. I do play a lot of board games, so I kind of was thinking about it in that context. And like sports, I might be a little bit more collaborative versus directly competitive, or more cooperative. And but like sometimes like a competitive game is nice depending on the context and the people and the situation and how I'm feeling. So it's very contextual.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. One thing that's really interesting is someone will say, well, I can be detail oriented or big picture. And say, great, tell me more about that. And what might come out is something like, well, if I'm in a group and everybody else is really detail oriented, then maybe I'm the person that pulls them out of the weeds and brings back the context, or vice versa. If I'm with a lot of people who are just spouting really great ideas and, you know, we're halfway through the meeting and it's like, come on, we have to get things done. Like, let's focus. Or sometimes people will say, well, it depends on if it's an issue I really care about, or that I have stakes in, then I'll be more focused on the details. But if it's something that's just more intriguing, but all of those are really, really useful pieces of observational data, not only to know about yourself, but to know about the people that you're working with. And so something so simple like this can spark really meaningful conversations. Any other thoughts on this before we move forward?
Just had an idea since Casey just joined, and he and I play a lot of video games. And so I was wondering, since so many video games are like individual, I mean, you could say that, you know, with the exception of the massively multiplayer ones and, you know, the group ones, but so many of them are, you know, you're working against the computer. Where would that fall on collaborative, competitive? What do you think?
I think it could be either. It sort of depends on your approach. One thing is, so people will say, oh, it's so cool you're doing like gamification. That's awesome. I've been reading a lot about it. And we try to make the distinction between, like, I think of gamification as like making a learning process. You get tokens after you do a certain number of lessons, or if you make a certain number of sales calls within a certain amount of time, you get a bonus. And that's fine, but that's more incentivizing certain behavior and to try to just change behavior at the individual level. What we're really focused on is using games and play to highlight the interactions between people. And so I think, and really, I think any game can be explored with that, even video games where you're maybe playing by yourself, but you're sitting next to your friend who's also playing or something like that. But even, you know, how are you approaching it? Someone might be like, hey, it's fun, I'm just hanging out with my friend, where the other person's like, I want to win and I need to destroy everything in sight. And, you know, okay, are those mindsets, is this just because the game is a release for you and this is just how you have fun? Or is that the way you approach a lot of situations? And if it is, like, how do other people respond to that? So there's just all these little moments that we can explore in ourselves, be like, is this intentional? And if it's intentional, what does that say about me? And how might other people read into that? So I don't think I directly answered your question. I'm not a video game person, so I don't have much expertise in that, but hopefully it made some kind of sense. Cool. Okay, we're going to keep going. Let me, actually, Brian, can you clear the annotate, please? So we think about, when we're designing game experiences, or when anybody's designing game experiences, we think about what's the level of outcome you want to get out of it. I'm sure you've all heard people be like, oh, we don't want to do another team building thing. Like, don't make us do trust falls, or like, we don't want another trivia happy hour. I think a lot of the time it's because there's not clear expectations of what people are supposed to get out of that experience. And we have these three levels, the iceberg analogy, of how deep do you want to go? They're all levels are really valid and can play a really important part in creating a culture and a team dynamic. But the level of intensity is going to be different. So team bonding is just, let's spend some time together. Let's have a shared experience. We're not doing work. We're letting our personalities come out and seeing, you know, how we interact when we're not that corporate robot version of ourselves. You know, maybe you'll get to know something about someone else. Maybe you'll hear a good joke, and it's just about that time that you spend together. The team building is about turning that shared experience into something memorable and meaningful by adding a bit of a reflective component to it. So why did certain people perform this way or ask certain questions as compared to other people? It'll help in team building. You're not so much looking at the team dynamic as a whole, but opportunities to learn more about other people and have other people learn more about you. And just in doing that, you create this shared reference point for a team. And we often really underestimate how valuable those shared experiences can be. Those moments of, okay, remember when we did this? Yeah, this is the same thing. And it's a very shorthand for the type of question you asked or the way we spoke to each other or the type of activity that happened. And intentionally creating those is going to be really, really valuable, especially when it's paired with reflection, because then you're making sure that people have the same types of takeaways from it. The base of the iceberg is team development. And that's where you get even more in depth with the reflection, not just at the individual level, but what's the group dynamic of a whole? And based on how a group of people performs within a certain situation, what can you tell about the strengths or the weaknesses of that group, or what type of culture they need, or whether the work environment that they're in is setting them up for success or is in some way impeding their success. That's more of like an organizational development lens. And it's really all about the types of activities you would do and mostly the types of questions that you would ask, if any questions at all. Thoughts or questions about the depths of play? The other dimension that we add into, and I'll show you our game catalog in a second, is we've built this framework of what are like experiential outcomes? What's the team characteristic or like the dimension of team culture that you want to explore through games? And a lot of games can be facilitated in a slightly different way based on what's the experience you want them to have, what are the tensions that you want to create. Sometimes you just want a team to have an easy win, so they build some confidence and have some motivation and be like, okay, we can do something and now we can go on to something harder. Sometimes you want to introduce some type of uncertainty and see how they get through it. And so we came up with these 9 different cards along these 2 axes to sort of pinpoint what's the type of group dynamic or element of culture that you want to discuss. And the columns are based on the individual tendency towards feel, think, or act. And the rows are based on the area of intent for the work within the organization, if it's related to why, what, and how. And with each of these, it could be a great strength for a team. It could be something that's really not present and the source of a lot of struggle or anything in between. I'll show you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please do.
Is this the head, heart, hands, right? Cognitive, affective, psychomotor.
It's very
framework?
similar. We put this together by doing like a meta-analysis of a lot of the different frameworks and models out there for both individual and group dynamics, and sort of organize things into buckets. And yeah, so we looked at all sorts of things like that. Yeah. Good question. And so right now, do you see something different on did you see me switch to another website? Okay. I never know if I'm sharing just that page or the whole screen. On our site, for each one of these cards, we've created statements of what does this characteristic look like if it's a strength for the team? What does it look like if it's a pain point? And then we have, this is an actual card deck that you can get a physical deck if you want, but we also have on our site down at the bottom where it says calculate, there's a survey tool to rank different statements, and then it would give you a report of which ones you scored highest on as the greatest areas of need, and which ones are pain or are great strengths, and then you can maybe pick a game based on that. And this is our game catalog is organized right now by these different cards, and so you could say, okay, we want to work on decision making, and go in, and here's game guides, instruction guides for how to play those games, including the the discussion questions for that particular game. And right now, this is all free on our site. So if you want to check it out, I'll put the link in the chat in a bit. Any questions? Any more questions on this piece? Okay. The other thing that we think about, and then we're going to get into playing, are just different game mechanics and how different game mechanics can bring out different group dynamics and learning outcomes and discussion points. So puzzles are really good for looking at grit and curiosity and how different people think and problem solve and put information together. Again, puzzles is a really big group. There's a lot of things within it, but it's sort of figuring out the unknown. Strategy is working through more intense problems that are complex, and you need different perspectives of how to put it together, and people who think in different ways and can communicate in different ways. Role playing would bring out empathy, exploring new dimensions of situations, creatively thinking and imagining. Kinetic games, that would be like sports or sort of minute to win it, where there's really a lot of movement involved, or even playing music and just sort of making rhythms or doing little movements, but just thinking about patterns or how to get better at something and how to very quickly learn in an iterative way. And then discovery, things like scavenger hunts, where it's just wonder and delight, not knowing what's going to be there and just being there for the experience of it. So there's a ton of different types of game mechanics, but these are the ones that we play with most. As you see these, can you tell, like, are there certain types of games that you like the most? Oh, SEL is social and emotional learning. Are there types of games that you tend to be drawn towards?
I love scavenger hunts, whether it's an online or like in real person. I find that really exciting. I love The Amazing Race. I always wanted to do it. I just really enjoyed that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So the finding something and having to not really knowing what it's going to be, but having the journey, the experience of the journey.
And I also like puzzles, but puzzles usually are puzzles that are not 3D, too complex, more visual. And then I can just work with patterns, and it's just discipline.
Excellent.
I was going to add, I like puzzles. I like using puzzles with groups, right? Rachel and I did one not too long ago where you take a marker, you sit it in the center of this wooden disc, and then the disc has got all these strings on it, and so many people have got to hold this disc by these different strings, and then they have to spell out a word, with like 20 people spelling out this word. And what's cool about it is you really get to take a step back and say, okay, so who took a leadership role, all right? Who took more of an observer role? What did you do at the very beginning? How did you get into the flow of it? What was the arc of learning there? When did it get easier? Yeah, Jacob's got it exactly. Sein Strippenzier. He's got the German spelling of it too, which is awesome. And just what's cool about it is that you get to expose all of these team dynamics, which if you're doing that in a workshop, you get to say, hey, you remember when you hit the S in that word? We're sort of at that point right now. You can use it as a proxy for the group process.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you'll see, so the climate reading and the game we're going to do next are what we classify as games or mini games. They're very isolated experiences. There aren't that many different rules that sort of get through this one thing. But then we have simulations that are more harder, more complex challenges that have different game components and require different roles, and are harder for a team to get through and can introduce more dynamics. So depending on how much time we have, and if it's a team that we think can have a little bit of a challenge, we would probably do a simulation, which we'll do one today. But if it's a team that really, they're already dealing with a lot of pressure, or they don't know each other that well, we might stick to the mini games. All right, so we are now going to play a game called The Visionary. And there are, because there's a bunch of people here, well, we'll do 2 rounds and have different people play in each round. And Brian's done this before, so we might make him just observe. So in this game, one person is the visionary, and I will send that person in the chat a link to a picture on the web. And the visionary has to describe that picture to their teammates who are collectively drawing that picture using Zoom Annotate in this whiteboard space solely based on the visionary's descriptions. We'll say in this first round, only the visionary can talk. The drawers are just, they're just listening and acting and can't ask clarifying questions. So that's an extra challenge added to it. For the visionary, this is not like Taboo or a game where you can't say certain words. You can describe exactly what you see in whatever terms you want to use. Just think about what details are most important to convey, to have your teammates come up with the best representation of that image. And there's a 2-minute timer on the screen. So for this first round, is there anybody who would like to volunteer to be the visionary? All right, I saw Rachel. And Casey, you could be the visionary in the second round. So Rachel, and then are there 4 people who want to be the drawers for this round? Kathy, Jen, Nancy, and Jacob. Perfect. Okay, the 4 of you get your annotate ready. Rachel, I will send you a message in the chat. And for the people who are not drawing or describing, as you're listening, think about what you find helpful in the instructions or what questions you would have. What you would be doing if you were the drawer in this round. And then we'll talk about that after the 2 minutes are up. So for the 4 drawers, do you have your annotate ready? Thumbs up. Rachel, let me know whenever you're ready and I'll start the timer, and let me know if you have any questions about what you're describing.
Sure. No, I think I'm ready.
All right, let's go. Good luck.
All right. So it is a blue thing, but it is, it looks like a bird's head, pretty close up. Kind of looks like Kevin from Up. He has a big like plume troll type feathery duster thing on top. 2 big eyes that are white with black dots, and a beak that's blue. He's facing the bottom corner, like the bottom, he's facing the left, right, he's facing the right. He has a green background. He looks like there's like plants and shrubbery kind of vaguely behind him. He has blue, it's like he's like a wooden thing. And he's got like rings on his neck going down. And yeah. Let me know, can they ask questions?
All right, we'll say in this last minute you can ask questions. And you can give direction based on what you're seeing.
Rachel, can you re-describe the head and the eyes?
Yeah, so he's facing the other way. So he's kind of looking, I think I said that wrong first time. He's got really big eyes that are like kind of cartoony, like white, and he's looking up towards, so his beak is going down towards the bottom left corner, and his eyes are looking up towards the kind of top, the upper left corner. And it's like a 3/4 profile view of his face. So I think that's pretty good. It's got a very feather duster looking blue plum coming out at the top of his head. And like a very blurry kind of greeny background that, like
excellent. 2 minutes goes by really fast, huh? Oh, I like that. I like the chaos, that last minute chaos of the hair. Rachel, I'll start with you. What was your strategy in describing the picture?
I think the like general orientation and trying to get like a reference to what people might, be familiar with, like Kevin from Up. And then just general layout of like how close it was. Like it wasn't like a bird close, far away, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And for the drawers, what was helpful to you in the instructions? What did you hear that let you start putting an image down on the board?
The up reference was really helpful because, using our previous knowledge, I was like, oh, I know that animal. I've watched that movie too many times with my kids.
I hadn't
Is there
watched
anybody
the
who's
movie.
never seen? Is there anybody who's never seen Up? And so didn't Nancy? Yes, Nancy and Kathy didn't get that. Yeah.
Never seen it, but I know what the color blue is, so that was super helpful. Was to give the
I
specific
think the
colors.
colors really helped.
Yeah.
And I think starting from the top, right, the head and the top, like really helped as well for me. I frankly, I didn't even know, I've never even heard of Kevin from Up. So I have no idea what you guys talking about.
So I'll show you the picture that Rachel's describing. So, we have the
We did great.
very big ones. You have the googly eyes. There's the green background, the ringed neck. This is pretty awesome. For the people who are observing, what did you notice about either the instructions or how people were drawing, or what were you thinking or feeling as you were watching that game go on?
I think this would be a great activity if you were trying to highlight and explain the curse of knowledge, and how what that is that if somebody's got a really strong mental model, and here Rachel can see this thing, right? Her ability to articulate it, it can be frustrating when somebody knows something and they're trying to describe what it is. An example that I like to use to get the same idea across is to describe a euphonium, right? I don't know if you've heard this one before, but if you look at the definition of a euphonium is a German baritone brass wind instrument with valves pitched in C or B flat, an octave below a trumpet, which doesn't help, right? But if you say a euphonium is a small tuba, people have got it right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one thing I love about this game is you can use it for, how hard it is to communicate something that's really clear to one person. You can also, another way to be used it is to talk about process. So, okay, in this round, it was one-way communication for the first half. And, there wasn't any time to coordinate or discuss sort of rules or parameters before or after. So what would you want to do differently next time? And you can do several rounds of this and have people practice being in different roles and just communicating about process. People don't really think about process a lot of the time. Even to say, can you do like a 10-second big picture description of the whole thing first before you go into the detail? That's a process thing. And some people might really need that, but not know how to articulate that. So this game is really helpful for people to articulate what are their information needs or what are their process needs, and how do you advocate for yourself? So should we do a second round? All right, I'm going to go to the next screen. Casey, you said you wanted to be the visionary, is that right? Perfect. Let me clear the screen. Oh, it's all clear. And who would like to be the drawers for this round? Priority to anybody who didn't draw last time, but anybody who wasn't a drawer last time want to be part of this one? Mateo, awesome. All right, if you drew before and want to try again, you could draw again. Who wants to join Mateo? Or do you want to see a solo artistic effort? All right, Nancy and Jacob, perfect. Do you, anything you want to, as a drawers, request differently this time, sort of process-wise or structure-wise in the instructions?
Maybe divide the canvas into quadrants or areas, top third, bottom third, or upper right-hand corner. That might be helpful.
All right, Casey, let me know when you're ready to start describing and I'll start the timer. All right, let's go. Good luck.
The top third of the picture is filled in with nothing but pandas. Pandas upon pandas upon pandas. There's pandas all over the top third of the image. So kind of center, bottom 2/3 with the left quarter and the right quarter. So if you take the bottom 2/3 and split it up into quarters, the right quarter is blank and the left quarter is blank. And you got 3 big panda bears in the center with 1 panda bear sitting on top of them. This is a cool image you found here.
And Draws, you can ask questions in this round.
So they're pandas. It looks like they're all standing on the asphalt, so that's not really as important here. So you got, oh yes, you got 3 pandas at the bottom. There's 1 panda sitting on top of them. So you see 3 pandas on the bottom. There's 1 sitting on top. They're all kind of looking to the right a little bit. So if you look at them, they're kind of all looking to the right. The majority of them are. We need some more pandas up top. More pandas up top. Imagine pandas upon pandas upon pandas upon the top. And
how many, Casey? Like
hundreds?
hundreds?
You're talking, that's a good question. Probably 20 different pandas at the top. So you're probably looking at 20 pandas. They're kind of facing different ways. They're kind of like mulling around, and they're like not real pandas. They're like ceramic pandas, but they look kind of big. You got a little more pandas at the top. I think we got a good thing with 3 big pandas at the bottom and a smaller panda up top. And yep, the right bottom side's kind of blank. The left bottom side's kind of blank. And the top is just full of pandas. Pandas here, looks like we need some more eyes on the pandas. I was like, oh, we're done.
Excellent. That is a lot of pandas. I like usually with this, the instructor is just more pandas. We need more pandas. Which is kind of a great motto for life. We just need more pandas. I'll pull up the picture that Casey was describing. It's just a ton of pandas. It's a lot of ceramic or wood or some sort of not real pandas hanging around. Pandemonium. Yes, it was pandemonium. So what was that round like? Open it up to anybody, to Casey, to the drawers, to people who are observing. What did you notice?
We need more pandas.
My first reaction was, despite living in DC, I had a lot of shame. I was like, what does a panda look like?
Yeah.
I wanted to like look up panda. I was like, where are they black? Where are they white?
Yeah, things that seem very familiar to us, but when you have to draw on the specifics. Yeah. Oh, Mateo said in the chat that the repetition was really helpful. Casey, were you worried about sounding really repetitive, or was that part of your strategy, was just that you thought it would be reinforcing?
I think there's just a lot of pandas, and trying to get more pandas on the screen is a metaphor for life, I think.
Excellent. Well, this is a great image. I'm doing screenshots of these. I'll send them to you. And so you can all have evidence of this incredible artwork.
Can we ask the artist to sign them? Is that possible, to get them to sign at the bottom? That would be great.
That'll increase their value exponentially. So it's easy, this is a really simple exercise, but there's so many different threads that you could pull from it to how different people give or receive instructions. Do people feel comfortable enough to put something on the page? It's not uncommon that 2 minutes go by and there's nothing on the whiteboard. If you have a team where there's a lot of fear of being criticized, or people feel like they can't really take ownership of things, and you say, okay, how come the page is blank? And I was like, I didn't want to go first, or I was afraid I would do the wrong color. There's just so many rich observations that you can pull from when you're watching people go through it. And even when you're going through it, of just saying, oh, wow, I'm curious why you were drawing the pandas that way and I was drawing them that way. What was your reference? There's just a lot to explore. Any other questions about visionary? or thoughts?
It was really fun. It was
I'm glad
very
you liked
fun.
it.
I did.
I'm glad.
This could be really useful if you're working with like crisis responders or people who are trying to communicate under a deadline or some kind of duress, where they have to think about how they're prioritizing their information. And so we can't possibly know everything about the panda image, but what are the most salient things that we need to know? And when you're first presented with the information, how do you break it down?
Yeah, that's such a great observation. It's interesting, you know, we have about 10 pictures that we use regularly for this, and to see what the initial detail that people hone in on to describe is so different. You know, some people it's the size and the relative size of the different pieces. Some it's the positioning, some it's the color, some it's, you know, getting the object very specific. And you're right, there's so many details that could be communicated. And if you can get some sort of team consensus on what is that the most important information to convey.
I also was just thinking about, you could use this for just like creating empathy for the person who is trying to get other people to do something. And there's not, maybe not line of sight, whether it's a hybrid remote worker, it's a new team member, and just, you know, self-regulation and emotional awareness of what's it like. I mean, this is funny, right? It's a bunch of pandas. It's Kevin from Up, but if you were trying to talk to, you know, an IT person, developer, and even if you have shared mental models, you might come up with something very different.
Yeah, and that point of, you know, doing it within a funny context. If you like, you know, we've used this to practice giving feedback and saying, you know, you rush right in and do your pandas, like maybe take a little bit more time to listen before talking about that in the sake of pandas, you know, around pandas is much easier than to be like, you're too hasty in how you do your work and the quality is really bad. So just learning about how to give feedback and what people respond to, and how to word things in a way that is specific and gets to the point without making people feel bad. You know, this can be a really good way to practice those types of skills.
Yeah, so I actually think like activities like this are just useful to be doing on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah.
I don't think they have to be at like a team building event. I think doing this like even once a week, or every like once a month, just to keep people connecting with the idea, rather than having a team meeting about talking about working together, let's do something like this, and people cop on pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's really exactly what we want to build, is just have you know, at this point we probably have a dozen games or so, but to just keep adding new ones that, you know, if you want to play every week and get a group of people, there's an endless number of things you can learn about people from playing. There's always something new that's going to emerge. Even if everybody hates the game, you can talk about why did we hate it, and then you can always. We have friends that we went to see a play a couple years ago, and we all hated it, but it's like an inside joke for us now of like, remember that play? And like it's really, you know, bonded us. We have this really weird shared experience that nobody else will quite understand the same way, and that's so valuable. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, thanks. There's an activity out there that's called back-to-back drawing, and there's a lot of different write-ups on it. It's really easy to find, and you do it in the room. And basically, what you do is you have two people sit back to back. One person has a picture, the other one has to draw that picture based on the description. I love that activity. I haven't been able to figure out how to do it online, so thank you for this. This is awesome. This is really cool. Thank you.
Well, yeah, and this one's also in the game catalog and under a couple different cards with different questions to ask around it. Great. So now we're going to move on to one of our simulations. I don't think we have time to fully do it, but we'll sort of go through it and reflect as we go. So we're not only having the experience, but reflecting on it and talking about variations as we go along, just to make the most of our time. So I'm going to clear, annotate, and move on. So this is our simulation called Flight Simulation. It's a team exercise where you're all working together to solve a problem. In this particular variation, you're all going to have the same information, but we have other ones that are harder where people have different roles and different clues and different goals, individual goals that may or may not be aligned with each other or with the group goal. So you are now the leadership team at Helium, which is the DC area's premier amusement park. It's an amusement park that's around the theme of pressure and balloons. And it's not a pandemic, so you just had this record-breaking season. Tons of people came to the park and ate hot dogs and cotton candy and went on rides and did all of the great things without worried about getting sick or being around other people. You just received the performance data from that season and are now thinking about park improvements for the next year. And you're going to be making a decision together about where to build a new attraction for next year. There are two different tasks in this simulation. The first one, as I mentioned, you're going to see a set of clues on the screen. This is the raw data. So there's pieces missing. It's confusing. If you look at it for a few seconds and have no idea what's going on, you're doing it right. People always say, I feel stupid. It's like, that's kind of the point. Like, how do you work through that together when you have to navigate through not knowing what's going on? So when we do this with a group, there's the first 10 minutes is trying to make sense of the information. You're communicating with each other using the audio and video. You can use annotate to mark up the screen. You can use the chat, whatever communication channels you want. You're trying to make sense of it. And during that time, you can ask the facilitator up to 3 clarifying questions about the information. And that's 3 as a group. So you have to decide together what are the most important details that you want to know. And there's a timer on the screen, so you're always aware of how much time is left. So that's task 1. The second task is once those 10 minutes are up and you have the answer to your questions, then you are deciding where in the park to build a new ride. For the sake of this game, the park is split up into a 4x4 grid where there are 16 plots. And so you're recommending which row and column the plot is where you want to build a new ride. So you have 10 minutes just to focus on understanding the information, and then 5 minutes to make a decision. When we do this as groups, if we had more time, there's a Google form that would fill out with a survey and then all the data pops up. Maybe we'll do it if we have time, but the exercise is still the same. So remember, there's 10 minutes to just make sense of what's going to be very confusing and very frustrating, and lean on each other, ask for help and share ideas, and then 5 minutes to make a decision. Questions before we go in? Just in case we do have time, if you want to open up this link, you can either scan the QR code, or I will put this link in the chat if you want to copy and paste it to see what the form looks like. Maybe we'll have time to do it, so just in case. But if you look at the form, you can also get a sense of what, there's some clues in there about how you might want to approach the simulation. Give me a thumbs up when you have the form pulled up, and I will go to start the simulation. All right, I'm seeing a lot of thumbs. Here you go. I'm going to go on, turn my camera and sound off, but just let me know when you're ready to ask a question.
I'm assuming we're allowed to talk to each other.
Yes, you can communicate in any channel available.
I'm wondering what's coming up for Mateo.
This is so much fun.
What do we think the different like the stars and the ends and the different quadrants? What information does that give us?
I think it's probably the different variables.
Yeah.
And the variables are safety, price, and happiness, I think.
I mean, I think
Happiness and money, according to the form.
According to the form. Good one.
so. Do we think that price is the one in the bottom, the one with the 10s and 20s and 5s? Does that make sense?
Sure. How about we make that a guess?
I don't know. Well, I guess it could be a guess, but we could also ask. Can we ask what it is? And then
Well, we might, like, we only have 3 questions, so we might move through and then come back and see, maybe. Or we can, if we want to.
I'm a high clarifier. I want to like blow all the questions right at the beginning. Which is a positive and a negative. So you're right to temper me.
What is the N?
I'm wondering if that's newer plots.
It's in the north.
No, that might be good.
Northwest.
Are all the newer?
So Angela says the will go up if it's on a prime number plot, but we don't even know the numbers of the plots, do we?
Numbers?
What are the numbers in the, like the south? Well, I don't, the bottom,
This.
the bottom left? Are
the
those?
PA, that one?
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
the
because there's 11 is a prime,
3, right?
3.
That's it.
That's it.
Sorry. Dog barking, apologies.
I also have a dog.
I don't know. That might be I, not 1.
What does the developmental order mean? Like which way is order?
Where do you see that, Jen?
Like under Angela's comment, like if the attractions on the prime number plots but the second part, sorry, of the plots are listed in developmental order. What does developmental order mean?
How they'll be built.
Oh, and which ones are newer? Okay, the order of.
Yeah, I
Got
think
it,
so.
sorry. Thank you.
I'd be okay if Jacob asked a question now.
Yeah. Ask away, Jacob.
Great. Alex, what does the bottom right data represent?
The bottom right data goes with Jeronique's clues and talks about the cost to build on each of the plots. So the cost of building a new attraction in each one of the different plots of the park.
Great, thank you. If
So
we
then
ask
that
what the other
means
ones
that-
are, we could figure out who's
Yeah. They all are related to somebody's stuff. So can we make an assumption that if it's Jeronique to right, it's Bruno to up, George to left, and Angela to down? Like
Jacob, you wanna ask that?
counterclockwise? Well, that's a closed question. Are we
Yes,
allowed to
can-
ask
yes,
open
we
questions?
can make that assumption.
So I think it's safe to assume that Angela's comments have to do with on the left-hand side, the one with the prime numbers, because that's the only one that has any prime numbers in it.
Well, which
Well,
one? The
except
one
for
above it
5,
or
but
the one
we
below
know
it?
those are cost to build. Yeah, this one.
Okay.
What do the letters mean though?
Jacob, you got a good question?
Yeah, Alex, what does the data in the lower left represent?
Yes, Angela was really sloppy as she was writing the order in which the plots were developed and kept going back and forth between a lettering system and a numbering system. So A, being the first letter of the alphabet, was the first plot that was developed. P is the newest. It's the 16th letter of the alphabet. It was the 16th plot developed. So that's the newest section of the park. So you can see where the the order in which the park was developed based on converting the letters to numbers and filling in the gaps.
Okay, so that means that that if the task is to come up with where to put it, there's something around, or limited to which plots we could put it in. And the price ticket and revenue is about related to, what are the three? We said the three cost. What are we
They
supposed
are
to measure on?
risk, happiness, and money.
Okay. Okay.
Right, team, we're at 2 minutes left. Alex, what does the data in the upper left represent? The asterisks?
Yep, that goes with George's clue, and those are the number of attractions already in each plot.
So we,
Oh, okay. So as the number of attractions goes up, so does the risk of accident. According to what George said.
Rachel, that purple square is the northwest. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so we have to pick a plot in a minute.
And so you'd want to rule out the ones that are crowded, right?
So you
Right.
have 5 minutes after this to pick the plot. The minute is just to
Oh.
sort through.
Great.
Okay.
so do we have to choose which is the best one based on one of the one of those characterizations or all three of them?
I think we have to consider all three.
All three.
Yeah, but it's kind of, already we're looking at, if we just look at George and Angela's matrix, right? The top, whoever drew the purple on the top left, I think that's where we're looking. We're looking at the top left.
No, that's where it's more likely to have an accident there. So you
I
might
thought
want
if there's more dots, that there's less people, less attractions.
more
Okay,
dots, less distractions.
We want
Meaning-
less dots and we want to stay away from the northwest quadrant.
Yeah, it's a both and.
I'm going to move to the next slide. Your annotations will stay the same. Everything will stay the same. It's just going to be a new timer.
Okay,
Did we get our 3 questions?
yeah. Can you guys explain that to me again? So the dots represent the number of attractions in a place. The risk of appetite goes up in the northwest as well as the plots. Oh, I see. Okay. I missed that part. Okay. So then aren't we looking at the bottom 2 in the middle? I'm still looking at the number of plots.
Except, yeah, the bottom two in the middle.
Or we look at this, all the way to the right, column 1, row 3, where N is, N has one, it has one ride. It's number 14, right? If we move across,
It's 15 to build it.
15 to build it. We don't know what N represents, but I'm going to assume it's a negative, not a positive. That's an assumption. So
Newer.
that's one option.
No, never mind.
The other option is row number, column number 2, row number 4, the 11.
It's a prime number.
It's a prime number, right?
Mhm. So the
It's
park
not
ticket
the-
price would go up.
Yep, it's only 10 to build and it has no N on it. And there's only one there. One ride there.
Okay, so I have a question. If the numbers relate to letters, letters relate to numbers, is E a prime number? Or is E and therefore not a prime number?
I think it's a prime number.
Okay,
It's 5. That would be my assumption.
so
Same.
that'd be a strike against these two.
Mhm.
And this one.
Right.
And number 1.
Thank you.
What are the middle numbers? Because 2 isn't, I mean, do we have to incorporate 2, 4, 8, and 12?
Any way of knowing which those are?
Great question. Those are just
What
the
if we
missing
made it-
ones between 2 and 16, or 1 and
Yeah.
16.
We know that those middle plots are not primes.
Right,
Which is all that chart tells us.
right.
Do we take cost to build into account at all?
Yeah, for the 2 that we considered, which were, it's 15 and 10. 15 for column 1, row 3, and 10 for column 2, row 4. Oh, row 4, the column 4, excuse me, column 2, row 4, the single star is a prime number.
Right.
Column 1, row 3 is not a prime number. But it is more to build.
Okay, so what are our candidates? I'll circle the lower right.
I think column 1, row 3 is a
Okay.
candidate.
Column 2, row 3 is a candidate because we know it's not a prime. It's has 2 attractions on it. It's not in the northwest corner and it only costs 10 to build.
20 seconds
Right.
left.
Yeah.
Okay, so out of these two, do you see a more compelling case?
I think the
The-
uncertainty is we don't know the cost of that, the impact of the extra star up there in terms of the risk of accident,
And
if it
neither one
has
of
more
them-
than one.
Neither one of them has the N, so that's, we don't have to, we can ignore
Yeah,
that.
they're the same on that.
All right, so let's go to the survey, and if you want to fill it in with which plot you choose. And then there's a couple other questions to answer. There's a second page. And give me a, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Give me a thumbs up once you've submitted. And so we rushed through that a little bit. A lot of times we would pause in the middle to talk about process. We might have spent a little more time at the beginning thinking about roles or approaches. So I just kind of threw you guys into it, and you did very, very well. And we'll go through, in a second, we'll go through the results. So did everybody submit? Anybody still working
I'm
on the
still
survey?
submitting. I'm still
Okay,
submitting.
take your time. Take your time. And while you're doing that, anybody want to share what was going through your head as you were doing that? How was that experience?
I felt
Wish
like we
every-
were studying for a standardized test. Those
I wish
logic
every team I
puzzles.
worked on was as functional as this one. People listened, they asked questions. It was great.
What else? So does anybody who likes this sort of problem solving, figuring things out games? Or maybe I'll say, who doesn't like this type of game? Jacob and Jen. All right, so let's hear, and Kathy too. So how did you feel? What was that experience like for you?
So I generally don't like logic games. Like I like failed the GMATs without even taking them. Just couldn't do the logic questions. But what I appreciated here is the way you set it up. It was very clear, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. It was a single board. It wasn't too overwhelming. I think the number of people on the call helped. There were conditions that made it much easier. And I think generally the group that's here wants to be here. So there's a couple of factors that made it easier. Yeah. And no one, and more importantly, in terms of when we started, the process was no one started saying, do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. That I'm not realizing that nobody said that anything like that.
Yeah, there was a lot of, what do people think? How do you feel about that? This group would form a great jazz band. As long as there's some musical talent.
This conversation with
so
a bunch of facilitators also reminds me of a conversation with a bunch of coaches. What's going on? What's on your mind? How do you best address that? It's really powerful here.
Yeah. Oh, I saw the chat, Brian. You wish you had one more question. What would you have asked if you had had one more question?
I probably would have deferred to Jacob. I thought he had the best questions.
Jacob, I love how you said up front, I just want to blow through them all now. I thought that was a really insightful comment and sort of laid out, this is my approach. This is how I would feel comfortable in this really crazy situation.
I really appreciated Jacob's question about that lower quadrant. He didn't say, is it this? He asked you, it was very open. He asked you to like basically explain it versus saying, is this what it is? And just the framing of it was, I think, gave us more information than we might have gotten otherwise if we framed a different way.
Yeah, we see groups get really creative and they'll be like, how does each of the 4 clues relate to, like, they'll try to encompass as many things possible. And sometimes it's that they'll just say, does this mean this? It's very interesting. All right, so I know one person put in that thing, did we win? Let's see. So it looks like overall wanted to be looked at a measure of happiness and cost, and there were some different plots chosen. You could see, oops, I'm going to do that. Based on those combinations, you see some of the boxes were shaded in, and the darker the shading, the better the plot for that particular combination of clues. So you didn't pick the worst clues, but it wasn't not the top ones. But I think the piece that was missing was that top right box was about visitor satisfaction. And the ends were like, no, we're not as happy in this area of the park. So that's just another dimension to be added in. But really, you worked through it. You met each of the tasks on time. You communicated well, so you did win. It's much more about the experience. And it's funny because no matter how many times I tell a group at the beginning, it's not about the outcome, it's how you feel during the process. Everybody's always like, did we win? What's the right answer? And then this next slide just is, these are just questions on what are people's experiences. With a team, we like to see, did people feel heard? Did they understand their role? There's variation to this where you can assign people a role, but it just gives you an idea of where you might want to dig in with the conversation, what threads you might want to pull. And again, there's a million types of observations that you can go to. These are some of the types of questions that we would ask to bring. First, that just situational self-awareness, how did you feel during this? What did what did you think? How did that compare to other people? And then using that observation to make some, to apply it to the work context or apply it to how you could work together better or approach different situations. But we don't need to go into all that. But now, yeah, I'm just curious, thoughts, questions, if anybody has any reflections you want to share.
That was fun and
Alex, are you asking us about the game or are you asking us about?
Either one. We're running low on time, so I'm just putting it out as a catch-all to anything you want to reflect on or ask, whether it's about the game, whether it's about the games in general or what we're doing or any other information.
Really appreciate the design of it all, how you've it's packaged, it's streamlined, it's all right there. Very few, the hardest thing was probably getting to the survey, but that was a low bar. So well done on just having it all pitched, and it looks great.
Thanks. We actually have another that sort of harder version of it. That's an app where each person gets a different role. And so people have their phones up, but then they're communicating over this and they have to figure out that they all are seeing different clues and that they're all trying to solve a slightly different puzzle, but they have to coordinate about it. So we're sort of building out a lot of games that can be played in different uses of technology and in different types of situations.
What is the best way to learn about the games, play with the games, download them? And there's, how it is when you're learning a new game, right? It's easier to learn it by, I think, playing it rather than reading the directions.
Yeah, so I'm going to put a link in the chat. This is to that webpage that has those different characteristic cards and the survey. And there's also the link to get into the game catalog. We do. One thing that we're starting to do is training facilitators who want to use games in their work, doing a cohort program. The next one is going to start in April. I'll put my email in the chat if you're interested and I can send you the information. And it's generally about just how to use games, how to approach games and the different type of learning outcomes, but we will go through a couple of the different barometer games and how to facilitate those. And then we want to build this community of people so that hopefully there's a group of people that's like, hey, I want to practice facilitating X game. Are there people who want to join me online at this time? A group to practice and give feedback and also generate ideas for new games and new applications for these games. I feel so passionate that the way that so much professional development and team stuff is done right now is just not aligned with how people actually learn and change and grow. And so anybody else who's excited about this experiential learning, let's team up, let's get ideas together, let's, be part of this community and share resources. In addition to games in the catalog, we also want to have other tools that are out there, articles or videos or, things that people have found helpful. So it really is just the place to think about experiential and play-based learning. So please reach out to me for questions, comments, if you want to get involved in any way. It was really fun playing with you guys.
Thank you, Alex. Big hand to Alex. Thank you very much. Yay!